Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 20 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by Morgan Carter. We will be talking today about why the Western media is is siding with the terrorists. We put Hamas in the title just because probably YouTube doesn't like the word terrorists in the title, although we have done that. But yeah, before we get to the topic, just a couple of news updates. There's the news that I would like to report is not happening and doesn't look like it's going to happen. So I'm going to report whatever um, somewhat good news we can talk about, which is Israel today neutralized the number two person in Hamas's intelligence, the person who was involved in the planning of the October 7th attack. So that is some good news. There's also, Daniel, if you can share those images. These are images released by Israel to show that they're doing something. Now, again, that something is not um, near enough. Can you share it in a way that is basically the only thing that people see so that it's bigger? Sure. So these are what you're about to see is before and after. If you're listening to this in the podcast, I'll describe it to you. It's before and after pictures of some parts of Gaza, a few neighborhoods. It's you know it's nice enough to look at. It would be nicer if there was more devastation and you zoomed out and there would still be more devastation until you saw that all of Gaza Strip is no longer a livable place, which I think is the minimum that we can ask from Israel to do at this point. Um, all right, Daniel, while you are working on that, and by the way, if it's not possible, we can show it as as an additional kind of third screen, but it is better if everybody can see it. There it is. There it isn't. We can't really see it, but oh, there
There
it
we go.
is. Okay, so this looks like an after picture. Is this okay? Is this the same place that we just saw? This is the before, right? And this
Yep.
is the after. Yeah, it looks like it has improved over the past few weeks. Um, yeah, this is another one. Yeah, if you can zoom in on that, yeah, that looks, yeah, the people of Gaza, they have a pretty good situation there. They have parks and whatever that green stuff is, and nice homes. Is that the after? No, that's
Yep.
that's still the before, right?
No, So that's there the after.
Oh, this is the after. All right, yeah, that looks like it should. Kind of, although I think some homes are still there. All right. There was more, but yeah, it's a 30-minute show and we're already 5 minutes into it. So yeah, I mean, the reason I do these news updates at the beginning of the daily objective is so people can get some of the updates that, again, there aren't many updates to give, at least not today. Um, get some of this uh from a relatively friendly source, unless you are pro Hamas, in which case I'm not a friendly source. And we're yeah, kind of filtering out um, the views that you get along with the reporting in Western media, and the reporting itself is kind of skewed as well. So that is our topic today. Morgan, we've talked about the BBC, which is especially bad. This is we see reporting that Al Jazeera would be proud of. It is, they refuse to call Hamas a terrorist organization. Their interviews, they of course, like many others, reported the hospital bombing blood libel as if it was unquestionable fact. Um, and I haven't seen them issue a non-apology the way the New York Times has. When you see them interviewing anybody who is from Israel or pro-Israel, they are they're hostile. It's hostile interviews. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that in general, on the BBC in particular?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question why so many of the mainstream media outlets default to that kind of position. The BBC is a good example. There's and the Al Jazeera reference. Yeah, Al Jazeera is one of the worst ones out there. There was also one I came across called the Daily Star, which I think is very interesting for discussing this. I think something we should just say at the outset is from the perspective of the other side of this issue, they see it inverted, which is probably quite typical. That the way they see it is that Western media is far too Israeli friendly, is far too positive on Israel. And I think there's a number of things to say about that, which we'll come back to. But the BBC, I think there's a couple of things which goes on, which I think there isn't, these crimes aren't unique to the BBC, but I think fundamentally the way people react to what's happened in Israel betray a couple of key things. One, which is a deep kind of anti-principle perspective in how they think. Um, I think a deep influence of post-colonial thinking. I think that sometimes is underappreciated for how much that influences animus towards Israel and a pro-Palestine kind of feeling. And then a deep Christian kind of thinking, which is just so deeply ingrained in people, where they want to support the underdog no matter what, the weak side, almost no matter what they've done. And I think that's what drives a lot of it. And I can get into that a little more. I actually kind of wanted to ask you, because you grew up in Israel, I mean, what was your perspective from Israel of outside media sources reporting on this? Like, how did it seem from that perspective?
So I look back to 2002 when even before that there was the Intifada started in 2000, the second Intifada. There was uh, there was the famous lynch in Ramallah. Nikos has spoken about it, I think, on this channel as well, where two Israeli reserve soldiers took a wrong turn, ended up in the city of Ramallah, which is Palestinian controlled, were arrested by the Palestinian police. Of course, this is a part of the Palestinian Authority, which is essentially Fatah, the PLO's what was considered a terrorist organization and became a legitimate government through Israel's peace deal with them, the Oslo Accords in 1993. So they arrested the soldiers, they held them in the station. Then the mob, found out, showed up, lynched the two soldiers to death. There's videos of them. They're in the police station. They're throwing them out of the window. I don't remember if they were dead at that time already or not. There's this famous picture. I'm sure if you, I haven't done this, but if you Google image Ramallah lynch, one of the first pictures you'll see is this Palestinian guy holding his hands up, and his hands are covered in blood, and of course the crowd is cheering. So it's just and Ramallah, of course, is supposedly one of the not so bad so-called Palestinian cities, but the people. This is why I reject this separation between Hamas and the Palestinian people. The people heard that there are Jews in the police station, so they came and did and as I've said before, lived the values of the Palestinian people and slaughtered them like they did like other Palestinians did to so many on October 7th. And the way this was reported at the time, I remember Israel's response was to call up the Palestinians, say evacuate that police station because we're going to bomb it, and then they bombed the empty building. And both the Clinton administration, I believe, condemned both sides, condemned the lynch and condemned the response. Western media reported on it in much of the same way as they always report about Israel, which is, at best they say, yeah, this thing the Palestinians did is kind of not cool, but blah, 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 occupation. So, yeah, I think this has always been the case. And in 2002, especially March 2002, when there were daily terrorist attacks in Israel, and then Israel went on a ground operation in the West Bank, the way that was reported was really horrendous, because they again reported, we talked about the so-called massacre in Jenin, which was reported. Also, the number 500 was given, 500 deaths. the Palestinians said, and the Western media reported it as fact. When journalists came in, I remember they said, it smells like death. And when the numbers actually came out, which was after a long investigation, because that's how Israel does things, they report the findings after a months-long investigation. They found out that 52 Palestinians died, most of whom were terrorists. 23 Israeli soldiers died, and but the damage had already been done, in the sense that the Western media reported the terrorist talking points. The mindless mob in the West flooded the cities with their from the river to the sea chants. And so, this is not something new, but it's never not infuriating to see.
So I think one of the ways that Rand is useful for thinking about these kind of things is she has this view, which I'm trying to think exactly where she expresses it, but it kind of comes up all the time, is that people have a kind of deep need to feel like they are moral, like they're moral actors. And I think in times of crisis, or in times of international crisis, I think an important thing to understand is that people fall back on their moral views, even if on the day-to-day level, they kind of abandon them, they don't think about it too much. In times of pressure or crisis or emergency, they kind of fall back on, what should I do? What do I need to do? And because they have this kind of deep Christianity ingrained into them, that is almost what comes out. They have it kind of automatized in their mind, and so it just comes out as a reaction. And I think that is what motivates a lot of this. And I think what's interesting about the influence of post-colonial thought on it as well is, if you look at the way post-colonial kind of reasoning goes about this, is it forms a lot of the same structure that I might use to be pro-Israel. So, for example, they cite things like, you need to be on the side of the victim. There's people who have aggressed here, and there are victims of that aggression, and so on and so forth. They just completely invert the equation, if you like it. So it's the Palestinians who are being aggressed against. They're the ones having violence done onto them. They are the occupied, whereas Israel is the colonizer. And I think what that kind of reasoning allows people to do is to feel like they are moral agents protesting a moral crime that's going on. And yet what they are actually doing in reality is supporting an incredibly destructive kind of pro-death perspective, instead of being pro-life and pro-civilization, which is what a kind of support of Israel would be. So they end up supporting Hamas, slaughtering and killing innocent people, whereas what they're claiming to be is on the side of the people who are the innocent civilians being murdered. So it allows them to invert the situation from how they should properly perceive it, and feeling like they're moral. I think that's what goes on with a lot of pro-Palestine support. And I think a lot of that is picked up in universities, and then people at universities go on to work in media. And I think that's why you kind of see this expressed in the media very much. I think it's also worth pointing out that not all media establishments are as bad as that. Even if they're not perfect, broadly, let's say the right-wing media in the UK is better. So the Telegraph, the Spectator, to some extent the Times, even the Daily Mail, even though the Daily Mail is a complete rag, they broadly voice a kind of pro-Israel point of view. And even though they sometimes voice the kind of altruistic ceasefire perspective, they also are very good about Israel's right to self-defense and realize that there's something wrong about the calls for ceasefires. So those are my thoughts about.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you definitely about the Telegraph. Generally, when there's any issue, when I see the way it's being covered, and then I look at the Telegraph, I think, okay, that's better. And then, for a moment, I think of them positively, and then I realize, if that's better, then we're really screwed. Like, if this is what we are looking to for better reporting. Yeah, there are things that the media. And by the way, I think with news channels, maybe I haven't watched GB News, but I think for the main news channels in the UK, they're all bad on this, all of them, and so they don't go full pro-terrorist, like the use of the word genocide is something that is often repeated by people who know what genocide means. I guarantee you they all know the definition. They all know that this is a lie. They know even if they believe Hamas death toll numbers, which of course is if they do, then they're lying to themselves. But even if they believe that, Uh, they probably also believe Hamas's numbers when it comes to what the population of Gaza is. They know Israel's military capabilities. They know what genocide means. This is an intentional lie that they keep repeating. Now, I haven't seen the mainstream news channels or the mainstream news shows on channels, the ITV and the like, use that word, but they have people on who use those words. So there was this controversy. Luckily, there's a bit of controversy around this. It's not completely accepted by
Yeah.
the entire public, but there was this controversy about this woman who was on ITV as some sort of expert or journalist or something, and there's a video of her from October 7th celebrating, like she's filming herself in the car, saying what a victory this is, and nothing can take it away from us, and so on. So yeah, that's and by the way, I keep going back to this thing John Wass said on a show where he said, they're using our morality against us. I think they're using our kind of lack of coherent principled stance against us, and this is what they do also when you mentioned that the other side claims that the media is pro-Israel. I don't think anybody as pro-Hamas as they are actually watch BBC's coverage and think that BBC is not on their side, but they will say that to pressure the BBC or counter pressure the BBC into continuing their current coverage or making it worse than it or better by their standards. So yeah, I don't believe any Palestinian or pro-Palestinian or anti-Israeli person who claims that the media is biased in favor of Israel, because again, they're reporting Hamas propaganda as news.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. I mean, on there being controversy around people being pro-Palestine in the news, there was Owen Jones, the great journalist for The Guardian, appeared on Sky News and got into an argument with a Jewish lady about the Hamas attack on Israel. And he kept kind of deflecting and wanting to get back to, yes, but Israel has committed barbarities as well. And I was very pleased to see that that was a controversial enough moment that people still saw that and knew that there was let's just be honest, an awful lot of bullshit going on there. So the great British public are not lost as of yet. As to whether they honestly believe the BBC is pro-Israel or not, if you think about, like, why do I think the BBC is too pro-Palestine? It's essentially because, kind of like what I was going to, that it's to do with my moral view that Israel is the victim who's been aggressed against, and that by calling for ceasefires, what they're doing is actually siding with the aggressor. They're actually giving moral credence to the aggressor. And since they hold that kind of post-colonial perspective where it's inverted for them, I think that they see it the other way around, that the BBC, by not completely condemning Israel, by saying Israel may have a right to defend itself, it just has to do it in certain ways, they see that as giving credence to Israel. I think that's probably why they view it that way. Now, whether that's fundamentally honest, I don't know, but they might be able to delude themselves with that kind of reasoning, I think. And then what you mentioned about mentioning genocide, that is something that I do think is pretty much always dishonest, because if you think about in the Israeli-Palestine conflict, Israel was founded by a lot of the people who founded it at the time as a response to what happened in World War II. And by accusing Israel of genocide, it's a way of just really twisting the knife and making it sting, and putting a lot of moral guilt on Israel. And I don't view the use of genocide, like you said, Raz, I don't think people are honestly mistaken about what it means. I think they're just really trying to make it sting. So I take a very dim view of the people who accuse Israel of committing genocide, one of whom is Owen Jones. So there you go.
Yeah, and so they know what Israel can do, what Israel is doing, what Israel is holding back and not doing. They also know, what the Palestinians do when they can, and they know that October 7th, it ended in 1,400 deaths because that's as many as Hamas could kill. If they could have killed 6 million Jews in Israel, they would have. They don't have that capability, or it wasn't, a part of the phase 1 plan of this war. So yeah, they know that they are siding with genocide and yet accusing the other side of doing that. So before we go, there's I don't know if you saw this. I saw just a clip. I didn't see the full interview. Rachel Riley is for our non-UK audience. She was a host. I don't know if she's still a host of Countdown, which is a interesting game show. I recommend it.
She's a TV celebrity. Yeah, Countdown. Cats does Countdown, which is a kind of comedic version.
Yeah, and so she's gotten in trouble in the past because she speaks out against anti-Semitism, which is a risky thing to do in the UK, especially nowadays. And she was on the BBC. I saw like whatever somebody shared of it. I think it was less than a minute long, and she was accusing the BBC's coverage of being biased. And she was one of the things she was saying was she was talking about the pregnant woman whose baby was cut out of her and then beheaded, and then she was beheaded, and the BBC said, well, this is not verified, nobody's seen. And she said, well, no, journalists have seen these images, and journalists. So Israel is doing this thing where there are now more journalists from around the world in Israel than ever before, and Israel like sits them down and shows them the video, takes them on tours of the kibbutzes and villages that were destroyed. And I saw a TV story about one such trip, and they're getting off the bus or the buses, and the person coordinating is checking that everybody's there, and then he goes, where's the BBC? And of course the BBC doesn't show up to these things. They show up, they're in Gaza, and they actually said this in one of the articles today. Somebody from the BBC was talking to conservative MPs, and they were questioning him about the coverage, and he said, well, we want to cover from we want to keep covering the story from different angles and from different places like Gaza. He didn't so much as say, if we want to keep covering this from Gaza, we have to side with them. But that is the fact. That is the truth of the matter. Israel will let the BBC report from Israel while it's doing propaganda for its enemy. Hamas will not. You say the wrong thing in Gaza, and you will suffer the fate that 1,400 Israelis suffered on October 7th.
Yeah, I have a lot of good things to say about Rachel Riley. She really stood up at an important time around anti-Semitism, really, when because she came out as a kind of anti-Semitism activist when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, and came out consistently for a lot of that stuff, and that's when she started receiving a lot of online abuse about it. And so I didn't know that she'd been on the news talking about this, but good for her. One of the ways in which you can see media organizations have double standards concerning Israel is when they require higher standards for proof around things, when they would report certain things as fact that even if they haven't verified it, and they require such a higher level of verification for other things that it betrays a double standard. And I think probably it sounds in that case that there is that kind of thing going on. And as you say, there's a huge number of journalists in Israel at the moment. I have a friend who's a journalist in Israel at the moment. Maybe we should get him on the channel. And just like you can see it on their Facebook stories. If you go look at journalists in Israel at the moment, you can find it on their Instagram stories. It's not, and I'm not saying that's like a brilliant source of news, but it isn't like this stuff is actually hard to come across. It's important to be cautious in times of war. There is a lot of misinformation that flies around at first, but from the sound of that interview that you described, it sounds very suspect to me whether they were really concerned with having good epistemic standards or whether they were kind of, feeling more sympathetic to one side than another.
Yeah, by the way, I think I know who your friend is who is there, because I think I saw him share it somewhere on social media. So yeah, we can talk about that off the air, and hopefully we can get him on as well. Thanks, Morgan, for joining me. The reality show is going to begin in a few minutes. We'll wrap up now. I have time to get a cup of coffee. We're going to talk about Jews for Palestine. It is what it sounds like. I'm going to be pretty harsh. I don't know what the other panelists will say. We'll find out soon enough. You look like you had something to add.
No, it's one I do have something to say about. I'm not going to be joining, but I just want to say it's my first time on TDO, so I've made it to the big leagues. I've graduated, so happy to be on.
Well, I appreciate that, but on the other hand, the way you say it makes the reality show sound like a small leagues, which it is not. They're both equally important. And Bonnie, thank you for the super chat. And yeah, we'll see you all in a few minutes on the reality show. Thanks.